Okay, welcome everyone to Freeform Fitness Personal Trainers Who Care podcast. I'm Ashley Laurie, CEO of Freeform Fitness, and I'm here with a bunch of the best people I can ever think of. I was like, how can we start off season 2 of our podcast with the best guests possible and the greatest minds in one room? And the greatest minds, eh? I've searched long and hard for the right people, and I feel like we finally have this solid team of just exceptional beings that are trying to make a difference in the world and trying to help people realize their full health potential. And in a world where it's chaos and there's so much information, it's really nice to come together and just help people navigate this world and come up with the right answers. And so I've welcomed here Cameron Wong, and he's a personal trainer here at Freeform Fitness, also the head coach at all of our locations. So he takes care of all of our trainers. And then I have Dr. Behn. He is a cardiologist, and he owns the Cardiac Longevity Clinic. And then we have Deb, and Deb's a dietitian. And they're going to do a little intro for themselves just so you can understand who they are. And then we're going to get started on, I have so many questions for everybody that we're going to actually have 2 episodes because there was just so many topics that I couldn't even figure out. Okay, there's just so much to do. So first of all, can you introduce yourself real fast, Cam?
Yeah, I'm Cameron. I'm the head trainer at Freeform Fitness. I've been with Freeform Fitness for about 4 years now. And I mainly train out of the Canada location, but I also do the fitness assessments for Dr. Behn and the Cardiac Longevity Clinic for about a year now, and it's been going really well. Yeah.
Dr. Behn, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so Ben Bani Hashemi, I'm a cardiologist, work in Ottawa at Maryville Cardiovascular and started Cardiac Longevity Clinic, as you all know, about a year and a half ago. And we'll kind of get into some of it today, but it all kind of started with our frustration with how our conventional healthcare operates, the way we advise people, especially in the world of cardiology, where there's a lot of high-risk patients with many cardiovascular risk factors and metabolic disease. We're just not very proactive and personalized in the way that we look at, metabolic disease and risk factors and how to prevent future heart attacks and strokes. And yeah, so I'm kind of excited about our chat because a lot of it is about things that we advocate in our clinic to our clients and try to optimize and assess them for it.
I've met a lot of doctors, and that was the hardest thing is that there were a lot of no way of focusing on the preventative and the root cause. And that's why I think we clicked so much because you were like, let's talk about fixing it before it happens. And I was like, finally, somebody that's on the same page as me and trying to make a difference. And Deb?
Yeah, I'm Deb. I'm a registered dietitian and also have some certifications in fitness training and personal training. Can I say about myself? Well, I have my own practice here in Ottawa for the last about 12 years, and I see a range of patients, I would say, from areas of specialty, sport and performance, to some of the diseases that I deal with personally, type 1 diabetes and celiac disease, and then also a pretty big focus these days on women's health and perimenopause and menopause. Hopefully the evidence-based kind of advice that we want to get to the bottom of.
I can't wait to dive into that.
Yeah, and obviously working with Ben over the last year and a half to help him with his patients and the preventative aspect of cardiovascular stuff and metabolic disease.
I know when Dr. Ben said, you got to meet Deb, like wait till you meet Deb. And then we chatted and I was like, wow, your values are right along the same as us and your beliefs, which is always really hard to find somebody that believes in what, our belief system when it comes to nutrition. So I'm excited to have you guys all here. I have so many questions to ask you. So do women really need to train or eat differently than men?
No, not really. I mean, I've actually done a deep dive onto this recently and taking a course right now to kind of get to the bottom of those answers. I mean, I think that there's no black and white answers are never my jam. So I feel like don't trust anybody who says yes or no. But I think really in terms of what we know right now, if you're looking strongly at what the evidence shows, and that's to say that just because the evidence doesn't show it doesn't mean it's not true, but from what we know right now, there aren't really any significant reasons to change the way we eat or train based on gender, especially from a practical standpoint of actually making recommendations to people. So for the most part, training stimulus and dietary practices can be the same. And I think what's important, and I'll probably go back to this time and time again with the questions that you have, is sort of what's going on with that individual. What do they notice? What symptoms are they struggling with? And more tailoring it to those circumstances, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah. There's so much information out there, right? I think it overwhelms people to even take that first initial step. So what would you tell somebody if they were just like fresh and didn't know where to go or where to start?
Specifically with regards to women's health?
Yeah.
Or?
Man or women?
Honestly, I feel like people have stopped listening to themselves a little bit. Like I think we're so like lucky, but also I think paralyzed by the amount of information that we have access to. And what that's done is it's made people stop actually listening to their internal cues about how they actually feel or respond to whatever it is that they're doing. So I think that that's a key piece of advice because A, it's identifying what is the problem and what are the symptoms that I'm dealing with, and B, when I do it this way or I do it that way, am I in tune or able to decipher differences in terms of like how this is actually helping me or harming me? So, I mean, we could use an example, which we'll probably talk about later, like fasted training, for example. There's various research on that, I think, in terms of nuanced types of training and who should be doing what. And I think that's really, really interesting for the average person, though. If you train fasted and you feel like shit, like don't do that. If you train fasted and you try eating before and you feel good, then do that. I think that's number one. And then you can kind of get deeper into the science about like intensity of training versus, doing those different things where you can kind of fine tune. But overall, I mean, I think it's a little bit more about like listening to your body, reflecting on what you're doing.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And I know when we chatted, you mentioned as well, like changing behavior is so hard. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like habits and changing, being stuck in what you do on a daily basis and then trying to change that. What do you recommend?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much the crux of, I think, like what I do, because everything else can be done by AI. Ben and I were just talking about that. I mean, I think it's not news to people to start with small changes and make them into bigger changes. But I think that really has to be emphasized because I think what people, when they think about making change, they automatically get to the point of being very results driven, which makes sense. But being results driven doesn't always allow you to be part of the process in making behavior change. And so if you set out to make changes or, you have a goal, like I want to lose weight or I want to be fit, they are marking their success necessarily by like, did I lose a pound a week this week? Or what is the best exercise to be doing to get to that result? But they may be starting from a place where they're like barely walking.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, and will walking be the thing that makes them like lose weight? I mean, maybe not. Right. But if they're part of the process in understanding that walking is the first step to building a habit, to make a change, to then you're walking longer, then you're feeling a little fitter, then maybe you do lose a little bit of weight, then you add a little jogging interval into that, like, and then you've actually gotten from walking in the door at home and putting on your pajamas and having a glass of wine to now getting home and putting on your shoes and going for a walk. And what that does is that leads to, now that walk could then be a strength workout in your basement or a gym class, but it has to start with something. So one person I heard talked about giggle goals, which really resonated with me and some of my clients, where if you set a goal that makes you sort of laugh, that it's like so ridiculous that you're like, oh my God, like of course I can do that. Like I can walk around the block for 30 seconds. Then that's almost where you want to start, because that leads to the neuropathways changing, which is actually a real thing. And then maybe the world's your oyster.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Anything you guys want to add to that, Dr. Ben?
I mean, I think going back to men and women, I think it's important to acknowledge, because we talk about this all the time in our patients, is the fact that generally speaking, women just need a little bit more than men, just because of the fact that they usually start at a baseline level that's a little bit lower. So a little bit lower lean muscle mass. So it just takes a little bit more potentially discipline with regards to their nutrition and with regards to their exercise to probably get the same results. And some of that is just related to anabolic effects, right? The anabolic effects of kind of gender differences of testosterone levels, right? So, yeah, size. So men generally respond a little bit easier than women. So we find that with women, we just have to work with them a little bit harder. And then the hormones definitely play a role, right? Especially in premenopausal women, right? Like their menstrual cycle, and kind of you see this all the time, right? So sometimes they have to make a little bit of variation in their nutrition depending on what time of the month it is, whereas men don't necessarily need that kind of variations at all. They can be fairly consistent if they kind of stick to a program. So I think kind of that's probably a major difference. And then we're going to talk about it later, but definitely in menopause, right? There's a huge change. Men go through a similar thing, but not nearly to the same extent, right? Like testosterone levels slowly drop in men over decades, whereas for women, once they hit menopause, those levels of estrogen essentially tank, right? So they become, and we have many clients in our clinic that come through that are perimenopausal, and they literally, in a matter of weeks, they're like a different person, right? Because now their estrogen levels are undetectable. And estrogen is what makes you a woman to a great extent. So once you lose that, then you're a different person. And then obviously, we can kind of delve into it later, but you have all of these body composition changes. You have all these changes on your lipid profile, your insulin resistance. All of those things change dramatically. So then all of a sudden, they have this body fat redistribution, loss of their muscle mass. So they need a completely different paradigm with regards to their lifestyle compared they did like literally like a year before.
Wow.
So I think that's one of the things about women that's like, it's definitely a moving target, and it just takes a little bit more time, particularly once they go through that menopause phase, in order to be able to keep that cardiovascular risk and their longevity metrics more at bay. And I totally agree with Deb about the process, right? Like it's so much more about teaching them the right habit and the right process rather than focusing on the results.
Totally. We found that that's the most successful way of going about it with anybody who is successful with their results. It's focusing on the habit and not necessarily the result.
100%.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, just to touch on the habit part of things, that's the biggest thing I see with my clients is when they make small changes, when they go for that walk, it tends to cascade into better habits throughout their life. And they feel better. And same thing with the goals. People come in with certain aesthetic goals. I want to lose a lot of weight. I want to get rid of my belly fat. But it all depends on where they're starting. I have some clients who are a little bit older, who can't get up off the ground, but now they can, but they haven't lost that pounds. But where they measure their success tends to change as they get better at just going about life. And then those aesthetic goals may come a little bit later, but it's not always, it shouldn't be the end result shouldn't always be where you're trying to be right now. So yeah, just starting where you want to start and going from there.
I have a fun question for you. What's one simple daily habit you personally do to stay healthy? Don't both answer at the same time.
For me, probably the biggest thing that has made the biggest impact is sleep. Like I find, for me, that has been the biggest life hack over the last, I would say, 5 years, has been really to kind of tune in my sleep and kind of get it perfectly, because it's, I mean, everything we kind of talk about, a lot of these nutrition, exercise, sleep, they're all kind of linked, but I find sleep is one of those things that unfortunately a lot of times people think they can easily sacrifice on and they can still have the same performance because they all of a sudden feel like, oh, I have 2 extra hours a day. But they don't realize, and I used to think like that, but you don't realize the loss of productivity and the effect that that has in your overall mental and physical recovery completely outweighs any sort of extra efficiency effect or productivity effect benefit you would get from that extra 2 hours of not sleeping. So now my sleep is now like my sacred time, so nobody can interrupt it. I have this kind
You have a
of
routine?
yeah. So I
Routine?
have a huge routine. So yeah, I have definitely a sleep routine now where I don't touch. So all the electronics are off an hour before bed. I have an alarm on my phone that goes off. So once that goes off my phone, I put it away. All the computers, TV, everything is off. I dim all the lights in the house, and then the last hour of the day is kind of non-electronic activities. So I'm either reading or meditating or writing, something that is completely kind of cushions my day and insulates it completely away from my kind of a bedtime hours. And then that hour kind of allows essentially your body, is almost like a prompt to your circadian rhythm that is time for bed. So very much, and then consistency of it. So regularity of sleep is huge. So being able to have consistent bedtime and wake up time. So when that alarm goes off, that's the other reason for the alarm, is I know it's bedtime and it's time for my bedtime routine for that 1 hour. And then everything gets ready by the room being dark, by me being off of electronics and me doing that kind of bedtime routine. Then it's almost like a prompt to my circadian rhythm. By the time that hour comes up, I'm sleepy. I'm ready for bed. I go to bed within a minute. I'm falling asleep. And then dark, cool room, right? Temperature control, complete dark room. So I have like blinds that are completely dark out the room. And then wake up time is quite consistent. Even if I go to bed late, I wake up at the same time or around the same time to kind of keep that consistency, because that prompting to your circadian rhythm has a huge, huge role. And then even in the winter, trying to get as much sun as possible during the day, so not being indoor the whole day, has a huge impact. But again, is a part of prompting your circadian rhythm to know that it's daytime and adjusting your melatonin levels to the proper circadian rhythm. So light exposure, and then dark exposure and lack of blue light at night is also a huge, huge part of it. And just making sure that you're in bed enough. Like we literally, I think I talked to Deb about this. This is one of our very first clients. He was doing everything right. He was just not getting enough sleep. And it wasn't even that his sleep efficiency was low, but he was just getting, he was in bed 5 hours a night. And it was just not enough. Literally all I told him is sleep an extra hour and work out a little bit less so that you can get that extra hour. And his complete metabolic health changed. Like all of his markers literally changed within 6 months just by being in bed an extra hour. So I think that is huge.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I'm very jealous of your sleep.
I love sleep.
I can't say I figured out the sleep thing yet, but I would say my daily habits, and this is just personal to me, I'm not commenting on what I think everybody should do, but I mean, I think a big solid protein breakfast is a habit that I keep, and I have reasons for that because I notice certain things about what happens with my eating patterns and the way I feel when I don't do that. So as a regular routine, I tend to eat a pretty substantial breakfast. And I will say exercise or moving. Let's just say moving. I don't think people want to be around me too much if I didn't do that regularly. I think, and exercise, it doesn't necessarily have to be, the hardest workout all the time. But I do feel like if I don't get some kind of movement in my day, and it's like a really sedentary day where I'm just sitting around, I don't know, my mood, my energy, and then, I don't know. It's just like everything is not great for me. So I do think that that's like sort of the magical thing. And exercise has helped me through most of the obstacles that I think, like if I'm having a good day, if I'm having a bad day, if I'm stressed, if I'm whatever. Like, it just really gets me.
Yeah.
I feel like it fixes a lot of
I know a lot of my
just
problems.
really a lot of problems.
If I lift heavy, I'm like, oh my God, I really needed that today. I had a really hard, stressful day, and I just needed to like pump some iron, get that out, and just feel better. You know?
Yeah.
I feel the same way.
I mean, realistically, for me, exercise maybe started more from a place of wanting to change my body composition earlier in my life. And then maybe with the diabetes and stuff like that, it became more of a staple in my routine. But I would say exercise now brings a certain sense of accomplishment to my day that I can't get from anything else, you know? Like, even if it's like a shitty day or really long day with clients or something didn't go well or something like that, it's something that I feel builds in a certain level of like inner confidence and empowerment and resilience, like getting through something hard. So I feel like that really,
And self-love.
yeah, I don't know. It just really makes me feel full, I guess. So that's, and I've been pretty consistent with exercise regularly.
We can tell.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a little genetics, but I mean, yes, for probably 30, like maybe not quite 30 years or 25 years. I was not really an athletic kid, but early on from high school onward. So it's been pretty consistent, and I do protect that time. Yeah.
I love that. Cam?
I mean, not to piggyback off of those great answers, but something that's helped me recently is the sleep. I used to work afternoon, evening shifts, and I would always go to bed super late, and then my wake up time would be very sporadic. Sometimes I wake up at 6, sometimes I wake up at 10. Now I work more of the morning shift, and I wake up at a consistent time pretty much every day, even on the weekends. I found that kind of set me up for the day a lot better, and now I'm developing a little bit more of a morning routine. I'm drinking a lot more water in the morning. I'm having a better breakfast in the morning, and that just helped me throughout the day, and also having fun with movements. Finding play in movements. I've been playing a lot more recreational sports, getting back to that side of things, and balancing that out with the strength training, of course. But I think it's important for us to enjoy what we do and enjoy the exercise too, because a lot of people find exercise as a chore, and when it becomes a chore, it starts to fall off and not become part of your habit. But that's what helped me recently. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, this question I'm so excited for. Gender differences in aging, myth versus science. Who wants to go
maybe I'll speak
first?
to that
That's
first.
great.
So I guess I said earlier that there aren't a whole lot of strong evidence-based things that are different. I think that one study that sort of recently came out, and I can send these links later if you want, if
Yeah,
people
that'd
are
be
interested
great.
in the research. There is sort of like a linear trajectory of sort of muscle mass losses and the process of aging with men and women that's similar. But there is some evidence that actually does show that there are decreases in strength and power, specifically with women, correlating with sort of 45 to 55, which coincidentally or not correlates with sort of the like later perimenopause and menopause years, where it's not linear anymore. So there does seem to be some evidence that everyone's aging and everyone's losing a little bit of muscle, and it's just sort of going along, and men and women are pretty much the same. So you could say that aging in and of itself has a bigger role to play than sort of men versus women. But maybe because that there is that strong kind of estrogen drop-off effect, or, you know, I think not even necessarily that, but even before that estrogen drop-off, we see perimenopausal symptoms impacting the cascade effect, right? Where there are nuances to maybe women do need to eat a little bit differently or change the training a little bit, not because they're women, but because if their hormones are changing and their sleep is crappy, you know, as a result of change in hormones, or their sugar cravings are higher as a result of change in hormones, which could be cyclical or increasingly not cyclical as perimenopause sets in, or earlier onset of glucose dysregulation and metabolic issues, which Ben could probably speak to a little bit, with cholesterol levels going up or prediabetes showing up in otherwise like obese or lean individuals. I've even seen it with endurance athletes where they hit perimenopause, and that is directly potentially correlated to hormone changes, estrogen changes. So there could be some differences, right, where men and women are different at a certain point. I mean, in terms of practical recommendations, though, it doesn't change the fact that they will respond similarly to men to a training stimulus. They will respond very well to strength training and be able to build muscle. They will still be better off eating more protein, as will likely aging men, right? But maybe women need a little bit more protein and a little less carb because maybe as a result of changing in hormones and estrogen levels shifting and body composition changing a little bit more dramatically a little bit earlier on, added to because they feel like crap and they're not motivated because they have less estrogen and their brain isn't working as well and they're exhausted or they have joint pain or other things that are side symptoms to perimenopause that not every single female is going to experience. That there are, that I guess that's where the customization of counseling comes in, where it's not, you are a woman, so you need this, or you are a woman, so this is the training program that you need. I mean, it's not so much that, but it's nuanced on, if you are a perimenopausal woman that is sleeping like garbage, suddenly has joint pain, then you need to change, then you need to change how you're training them based on what they're able to tolerate and recover from. And they might be doing better with certain types of dietary practices that improve satiety or, reduce their calories. And we do that in certain ways, right? With different techniques, right? So there are changes that we might make, but it's not, okay, women are different and men are, so then you have to follow rules. I think it's more a matter of what's happening. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, that was great. Dr. Ben?
Yeah, so just to, I guess, crystallize some of the things that Deb said, I would say like a big myth, for example, I just kind of took some notes here. You hear this, you see it on social media, women can't lift, definitely a myth. They shouldn't lift nearly as heavy.
Thank you.
Definitely a myth. Can't build muscle mass. Definitely a myth, right? So exactly what Deb was saying, the response to the stimulus of exercise and strength training would be quite similar. Men might have a slightly more anabolic effect because of the effect of testosterone, but women can be as strong with as much of a muscle mass, if not more, with a good, strict nutrition and exercise program. So definitely a myth. And then probably another big myth that we see this not just among the general population, but even among a lot of healthcare providers about menopause, right? So this whole idea that, the women's body composition has changed once they hit menopause. Now they've gained weight and they have more fat centrally rather than peripherally. So the whole fat distribution has changed and they're achy and that's just aging and there's nothing to be done about it. Definitely a myth, right? So it is not just aging. It's because of a very predictable, well-defined physiologic phenomenon that happens in women's bodies when they hit menopause. Their estrogen levels are dropping, and it's very well explainable why they're going through all of that. And there's absolutely a ton of things that can be done about it.
That's
It
so
is not just
interesting you
because
say
you're
that, because a
older.
lot of them, when they come to us, they're saying, my doctor just says there's nothing you can do, it's you
Exactly.
aging. So how do they navigate? Where do they go? What do they do? What would you recommend they start? Like the process?
Yeah, I mean, it is tough. I mean, it's definitely a huge care gap in the community of healthcare providers in general for perimenopausal women to seek care because there's a lot of misunderstanding and unfortunately a lot of mistraining of doctors in how to treat perimenopausal women. There's not easy access to menopause clinics. But yeah, I mean, it is very hard. A lot of it is now on the shoulder of really clients and patients to kind of try and find somebody who is willing to, first of all, understand menopause and the physiology of menopause well enough to be able to do proper menopause counseling with them and be expert enough to give them the right medical treatment if necessary. And a lot of time medical treatment is necessary. So this whole idea, and you probably all know about this, of how, hormones in women, perimenopausal women, was a big no-no up to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Because of this women's health study that came out in
Yeah.
early 2000s. Most of the facts and the evidence that was presented in women's health study have now been essentially busted. They're not correct. There's very limited number of women who cannot, based on available evidence, not get hormones. Most women, this is an option that is available to them. And if they have the right evidence and the right provider and they get hormones, they can get a lot of these physiological changes that's happening in their body reversed by getting the proper medical treatment. And of course, the lifestyle has a huge component to this, right? So if your body fat distribution and body composition is changing, and as Deb mentioned, your metabolic markers are changing, so you're becoming more insulin resistant, their lipid profile is changing in a way where the cardiovascular risk is dramatically increasing, hormones can have a massive impact in reversing all of that, improving their insulin resistance, improving their metabolic health, improving their lipid profile. So there's a huge cardiovascular protective effect for women to be started on hormones. I almost feel like that's almost like a separate 1 hour conversation.
I know.
But,
It's such we could spend hours here talking about it. That's great. Thank you.
I mean, I think it's important though to preface that by saying the first thing that they could do would be, first of all, preventative. Like, it would be great if every 30-year-old, before they are 45 and like feeling like poop, that they were already strength training, that they already understood how to do that they were doing cardio, so that they, so that by the time that they get to 55, they actually, like, it isn't an inevitable loss of muscle. It's actually mitigated by action insofar as you're doing something about it. And then the hormone therapy piece is going to be facilitated by, and probably, to some degree, are they doing the other things? Like, have they tried to address their sleep health? Have they tried to not drink alcohol? Have they, tried to adjust their caffeine intake? Have they tried to exercise in a reasonable way that doesn't make them feel exhausted? Have they changed their diet around at all? Like, without taking extreme measures first to see what can be modified. But then I get to the point sometimes with people where they are doing those things, and it's a difficult place to be to ask them to do more because they are
Completely
but I'm
depleted.
so tired, and I have brain fog all day, and I can barely get off the couch, and I used to be able to be resilient, and now I feel depressed all the time, and then I'm having these vasomotor symptoms, and then you start to think like, okay, and this is why it's so great to be as part of a team, because I'm like, I think you need hormones, but I can't do that for you, and so then you get to that block where you are doing, you're telling them the right things that you can control, and you have control over the things that you can control, and then the things that you can't control, that you can then say, maybe this would help, right? Maybe progesterone will help with the sleep, try that, or something like that, and then you have access to all of these other individuals that can then take it to the next step. So I feel like that's, in my practice, I've seen like that's a huge, like Ben said, a bit of unfortunately, I think women have been a bit gaslighted there with not being able to get, like, I have even people coming who are seeing female doctors of perimenopausal or menopausal age living like today, okay? And I feel like you have to be living in a cave to not know that the research has changed. They're like, but you're still getting regular periods. And it's like, yeah, okay. Like, that does not mean that you're not having these symptoms or that other things aren't changing. Like, just because you are not actually post-menopause doesn't actually mean, anyway, so that's very frustrating. and hopefully we will see less of that.
Yeah, I feel like we're very fortunate with the team environment because it's like we can feed off of each other and say, hey, we're struggling with this patient. What do you recommend? Or it's like you need more help. And so you need to, like, Dr. Behn, can you talk about some of the testing that you do and these markers that you find and how you communicate that with us?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that we try, I mean, whether you're perimenopausal or a man or a woman, is really kind of your metabolic markers, right? So what are kind of the main metabolic markers? So we look at a whole bunch of markers to look for, first of all, your insulin sensitivity, right? It's probably one of the most important things to tell us how metabolically healthy you are is how your body is responding to your insulin. So what is your insulin levels? What are your sugar levels? And how does that look like insulin levels generally being more sensitive compared to sugar levels? So we can kind of catch some people who are in very early stages of prediabetes. They would have elevated insulin levels before they actually start developing elevated blood glucose levels. So we check all of that. And then we look at some of the downstream effects of metabolic dysfunction. So what does your lipid profile look like? So lipid profile is basically a combination of different types of cholesterol products and cholesterol particles and fats that are circulating in your blood. So we measure all of that, and there are different patterns to that because there are different numbers that we measure. So there's LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, triglycerides, your total cholesterol, your non-HDL cholesterol. And we kind of put all of that together to paint a picture of what is the overall picture of how your body's metabolizing cholesterol, which is closely linked to your metabolic health as well. Some of it is genetic, but some of it is definitely linked to your metabolic health. And then there are a whole bunch of general markers that are also kind of downstream effect of your metabolic health, but also overall reflects your overall health. So things like your blood counts, all of your nutritional and vitamin levels in your blood, as well as some of the genetic markers that can increase your risk of having a heart attack or stroke, such as lipoprotein A, which is a big predictor. And then some of the other organ function things. So your liver function, your kidney function, liver particularly being very much associated with metabolic dysfunction. So most people who develop advanced metabolic dysfunction would have what we call fatty liver disease. So we can detect that on the blood work and on some of their other investigations. So some of those markers, and then we put together that biochemical panel with their body composition data from the DEXA scan to really give us a pretty good picture as to what their metabolic health is at. And then that becomes the baseline of a lot of the lifestyle recommendations we give is based on that imaging data and the biochemical data to tell them, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to lose a certain amount of visceral fat, which is causing a lot of this metabolic dysfunction and inflammation. You need to gain muscle mass. We kind of put that a lot more data driven. And if they come back to us, the nice thing about it is that we can actually see the progress in a systematic scientific way rather than just kind of looking at them and say, okay, your body measurements look like it's changed, looks like you're a little bit thinner and maybe you've gained some muscle mass. You can actually look at numbers and kind of give them a score, very factual, kind of data driven.
Yeah. And what would you recommend to somebody? Because like obviously our healthcare, it's no secret our healthcare is a little stressed right now, and it's hard to even get like a annual physical, or try to get answers of like where you're at, and you just have this problem, and you're like, oh my God, I am dying over here. So what would you recommend? And we see it all the time, and so what would you recommend? Where does somebody start with that, or how do they navigate our healthcare system to try to get the answers, or at least the results that they're looking for to at least start the process?
Yeah, I mean, I would say anybody over the age of 40, at the very minimum, they should have a lipid panel, fasting blood glucose, and kind of a blood count, liver and kidney function test, right? Like those are very basic tests.
So they would ask their GP?
Their GP, or they potentially go to a walk-in clinic, or they can come to a clinic like ours. But I would say those are the minimum that anybody over the age of 40, if they want to do a little bit of a health due diligence, they should do that at least once every few years to kind of get at least a kind of a general view. I mean, you'll still be missing stuff, but at least you would have a baseline to start with to say, what is my overall metabolic health is like? That will give them a kind of a bird's eye view at a very high level as to is there any major issue that I need to be worried about. So I think that anybody over the age of 30 should have blood work. But you don't see that, right? Like
No.
sometimes people go for years, they've been over 50 or 60 even, and they haven't had blood work in a decade.
And
So I don't think
they don't
that's
know that they
acceptable.
can ask either. I feel like there's also that portion of it. They're like, oh, what do you mean? I can ask to get my blood work done? It's like, nobody's going to save you. You got to kind of have to advocate for your own health at this point too.
Well, one of the biggest disservices that's happened in healthcare over the last 10 years is this whole idea that annual physicals don't happen anymore. So family doctors are not in any way obligated to do, and as a matter of fact, it's actually been taken out of even the guidelines, which I think is crazy for older people. But
And you're allowed one issue, right? When
Yeah.
you go see your GP,
Yeah.
it's like one issue. So obviously we need more people working, you don't go because you
which
don't.
is crazy. So it's like preventive care is completely discouraged because nobody's doing annual physical preventives anymore. You only go to the doctor if you have a problem, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because by then it's always too late.
Yeah.
Like you need to be preventive and proactive about these things. And unfortunately, the healthcare system right now, as it stands, it doesn't incentivize anybody within the system, particularly the providers, to kind of provide that care.
Wow, we went deep there, but thank you. I appreciate it. I think it was like a burning question for a lot of people. Okay, so there's one point here, we may have touched on it already, but there's perimenopause and women's health, how exercise, nutrition, and heart health shift. But I feel like we covered a lot of that. Is there anything else you guys want to add to that point?
Big thing I'm seeing right now is people being concerned about their bone density.
I mentioned that actually.
Yeah. Is that a test that you would recommend most people to get? Yeah.
Yeah, so there are guidelines about that. I mean, if somebody comes to me and say, I want my bone density, we can certainly, measure it. No, so it's the same machine, but it's a different protocol.
Okay.
So on the DEXA scan, you actually do get a bone density, but the bone density is not calibrated to actually give you your proper bone density. So it's not a normative data that we rely on, but the report that we send patients does give an overall global bone density because it does measure it. But the thing about the bone density, a lot of these radiological tests, it has to be calibrated for the question you're asking. So on a DEXA scan, it's not really calibrated for that. So we have to do what we call bone mineral density, which is a separate test on the same machine. But we can do it. We have the capability to do it. And huge thing again in menopause, perimenopause, that's one of the major things that happen with estrogen dropping is not just your muscle mass dropping, but also your bone density significantly dropping. And that's one of the most important things about perimenopausal women doing weight-bearing exercises and strength training is really to help. That is probably the biggest stimulant to building your bone density, or I should say at least maintaining your bone density, because with age, your bone density will drop, is really strength training. Is by far, if you look at the evidence, it has the largest cohort of data in order to, for preserving bone density. So yeah, I would say that's a huge one as well for perimenopausal women.
Yeah, a lot of people come in concerned about the bone density, but they also have reservations about lifting heavy, not getting injured and all of those other things. But at the end of the day, people need to start lifting more, reducing the amount of reps they're doing. If you're doing 20 reps of something, it's not really it's gonna be aerobic benefits, but it's not gonna really help the bone density side of things. It's not gonna help the joint side of things. So one thing I find with a lot of older people is that we do have to start pushing the bar a little bit and getting them to lift heavier. And I find that's been helping a lot of our clients and kind of changing the mindset of strength training that is you have to strength train. You don't just move.
I always see that in your report, and I love that. He writes progressive overload, which is like totally true, right? Like, and you see this all the time. Like my mom is going through this right now, like I'm trying to encourage her because she's pre-diabetic now. She kind of broke her hip and she lost a bunch of muscle mass as a result of that. I'm now trying to get her into the gym to kind of gain muscle mass. Like a lot of these older people, and I hear this all the time, just because they're older, they think they just can't lift heavy. Mm-hmm. Like this whole myth that just because you're 75, you can't lift. It's like, it's complete nonsense. You can be as strong and you can train to be as strong as like a 60-year-old or a 50-year-old if you're committed to that training.
You want it.
If you want it, 100%.
You want to work at it. Okay, great. there's so much I want to ask. There's like supplements, vitamins. I want to dive into it deeper, but we'll save that for episode number 2. Okay, so my next question is, how much protein do we really need?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay.
I know.
So if you're interested in this topic, I highly recommend following a guy named Stu Phillips, because he's kind of like the master of all protein research, and you're kind of getting it from the horse's mouth. Like he's
Thank you.
not like from like someone to someone who's saying that someone said something, and like an influencer then said something. So he and he does, like, I think recently, if you're following him, Mackin Prof, like I'll just point that out if you're following him on Instagram, that there is a bit of a focus on women and menopause and aging and stuff like that, because I think that's like a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
His recommendation, and I respect his recommendation, that for most females, 100 grams of protein a day is a good target for, if we're talking about muscle retention and muscle mass building, and if I'm strength training, there's obviously going to always be people on either side of that. And I think it's generally agreed upon that the RDA for protein, which is the recommended daily allowance, is based off of, these are guidelines that say that if you eat less than that, you will be deficient. That doesn't mean it's optimal. So I think we can all agree that, the like 2 ounces of protein that we see on the Canada's food guide is like maybe, sufficient for not having protein malnutrition, but it's not necessarily the target for optimal, which is, I think, what we're all looking to do. And furthermore, as we age, there's a little bit of, a little bit more pressure for bones and for connective tissue and for preservation of muscle. And we lose a little bit of our absorption of protein, gets a little worse. So a little bit more is better. I would say for the average female and an average male, 100, then 100 to like 150, give or take. And you could use the gram per pound of body weight sometimes. I think that it's a decent general guideline, but it's not amazing, because you do have a lot of patients or clients or whatever you want to call them that are overweight, or obese, or really, really large, right? Or really, really tiny. Like they could be on either side of that. I think mostly overweight, where if they're just like following someone and they say a gram per pound of body weight, and I see this all the time, it's not a wrong recommendation, but you probably don't need to be supporting 220 pounds of body weight in protein. And in fact, as Behn mentioned earlier, because women are typically smaller and typically have less mass and are typically shorter individuals, right? Just by nature of, again, exceptions, but mostly, that within the calorie budget that they likely have in order to maintain weight or lose weight, if that, they're not going to be able to eat. Like they would literally be only eating egg whites,
That's what it's overwhelming. You're like,
so that's not really true. I would go with a gram per pound of lean mass, if you know what that is, or a gram per pound of estimated ideal body weight. Like if you were to say, this is like the thinnest I could possibly be, then that's probably the weight that would be sufficient. Now, when Stu Phillips suggests 100 grams of protein for a female, and let's say average 140, 150 for a male, that doesn't mean that there aren't therapeutic advantages to eating more protein than that. It just means that the training stimulus is going to be more important than the protein at that point, from a muscle standpoint, right? You don't need to be like guzzling protein to see exponential amounts of effects on muscle mass. From the standpoint of like, I struggle with hunger, or I struggle with sugar cravings, or I have elevated insulin or glucose levels showing up, then there are advantages of maybe eating more protein than that. Totally safe, right? Like there's no risks to doing that. But I think at a certain point, people get so obsessed with that protein that either they're now drinking protein shakes all day long, which make them bloated and have no micronutrients, or they're replacing other things that are good for other things like fiber and things for heart health that we know are advantageous, like whole grains and other foods. They don't have any room for calories coming from like healthy fats or anything else because they're only focused on protein, and that can cause like other sets of issues, right? So it's not, protein isn't the be all and end all, but it is a good thing to focus on, I think, from the standpoint of body composition and hunger management and thermogenic effect of food and lots of other advantages. But typically 25 to 30% of somebody's daily intake, or like I said, 100 to 150 grams, or if you're really want to focus on gram per pound, I would say take a gram per pound of a lean mass number rather than a gram of total body weight, unless you are already like you could do a gram per pound. A relatively lean individual that like maybe needs a little bit more to build mass. I could probably consume 0 protein and still build mass, but you know what I mean? So but only based on the fact that he's a lean guy. So he wouldn't, if I said a gram per pound, it wouldn't be overwrought. That's the idea.
That was amazing. So what would you say are so we're running out of time. This is why we're going to have to do an episode 2, because I have like so many burning questions for you, and I know you know your stuff. So favorite protein sources and best timing for intake. What would you say the best? Obviously, you mentioned breakfast is like crucial to have a nice protein breakfast. What else would you recommend?
So in terms of sources, I think like lean sources of protein, and I want to preface that because if you don't preface that, then people start increasing their protein through nuts and cheese, and that becomes a disaster. So lean protein sources would be egg whites, lean chicken breast, various sources of lean dairy products like, fat-free or 2% Greek yogurt, which is nice. It's also fermented, so that's an added benefit. If you're not eating cottage cheese, you're very not on trend. It's okay.
It's
I think
a texture thing, okay?
I think blend it. Just protein powder is fine. Like I think everybody could have 1 scoop of protein or have that in their pantry if they're struggling from a convenience standpoint. And fish is amazing. Canned tuna, canned salmon, all kinds of fish. Very, definitely in promotion with the dietary styles that we talk about at the cardiovascular clinic, because it's also, pro-anti-inflammatory and good for heart health too. So, and if you're following more of a plant-based diet, I would say tempeh or tofu would be the 2 main sources there, because they are isolated proteins. And we say that they don't carry calories coming from fats or carbohydrates. So they give you the best bang for your buck if you're focusing on protein with some degree of respect to calories. So those are sources. Timing is actually less important when we look at the evidence on nutrient timing for protein, even from an anabolic standpoint of muscle growth. Total daily intake of protein is the most important. And then subtle nuances to protein timing, where if you're going really long stretches of the day, there could be like a slight disadvantage from a catabolic perspective. I think hunger management then starts to play a bit of a role, where there's that sort of like, I'm not that hungry, and then I don't eat it, and then I don't eat it, and then shit hits the fan, and now you're in the pantry like a raccoon. So, and that's where I think the nutrient timing is more important than actual like really significant evidence showing that if you don't eat protein every 2 hours that you're going to like waste away, or anything like that, or even after workouts actually. So the protein window is actually fairly broad, which is kind of nice too for people who maybe struggle to get more protein in the morning and then eat a larger dose of protein at night. I mean, I think that there are advantages and disadvantages of that from a hunger management perspective, and like maybe slight nuances to retaining muscle, but it's still actually okay as long as you're getting, anyways, that's what the evidence says.
That's awesome. Is there a cutoff time like that you would recommend that people just like stop eating, or?
And then they turn into a pumpkin and die? No, I think from a sleep health perspective, and Andrew Holmes, the sleep guy that we work with at the clinic, would say within give your body a couple hours before bedtime. There is some evidence to suggest that, food before bed is not the best from a sleep health perspective. And I think some clients actually really notice that when they make that change, because digestion is an active process, right? So you're sort of asking your body to do something when you're supposed to be at rest, and there can be some also interference with melatonin and things like that. I mean, other than that, I don't think from a weight loss standpoint there's any major evidence to suggest that, like the clock strikes 9 and like it's game over or anything like that. I think that for the most part, it really comes down to behavioral things where chances are if someone's eating at 9, it's not baby carrots. So and when people sort of take on intermittent fasting protocols and they say this really helped me and changed my life, oftentimes it's because they used to snack at night and now they don't. It's not because like fasting really was this magical thing. It's because they were eating crap like at 9 o'clock at night, like snacking, and now they're not. And now that's 400 calories that they're not getting. So I think that there's more of that behavioral piece than there is really solid evidence to say, and again, I think it depends on what you're asking, if it's about sleep or if it's about health or if it's about reflux or, other things, rather than if it's strictly about weight loss, for example.
Okay, I want to touch on fasting because you mentioned it. What's your take on fasting?
I think fasting can work for people, and I think fasting cannot work for people. So I would say I have maybe 50-50 where fasting has worked really well. They don't care about breakfast. They're not hungry. And they find that it sort of actually dampens their appetite, and they're happy to sort of eat 2 meals where they don't have to micro focus on every calorie they're eating, and they can eat larger meals. Great. I think there's probably some decent evidence around people who have more metabolic markers where glucose levels and things, that fasting actually has some advantages. Where I see it not working for people is like, for me, if I don't eat that protein breakfast, I'm like, like it's 4 o'clock and I feel like I can't satiate. Like I just like, now I'm eating this or that. And now it's just feels less controlled for me. And I do find that some people have that where they're not eating breakfast, or maybe they're fasting through all of their training sessions, which isn't necessarily bad. And we can talk about that, but their hunger isn't managed well. And so then they're sort of like skipping that meal, but then it just bites them in the ass because then they're snacking at night because their hunger is not in control. So I think for all the evidence that we have that it's could be helpful from a glucose control perspective or a weight loss perspective, you also have really good evidence that shows that starting your day with a bigger meal and a high protein meal circumvents, appetite issues or, control issues or sugar cravings later in the day. So I think it's a situation of like, try it. If it works for you and you feel great, do it. If it doesn't work for you, don't be too attached to it. Interesting evidence around fasted training, if that was going to be the next one. Like it for zone 2, low intensity training, actually evidence suggests that fasted training can help with mitochondrial production and aerobic adaptations to that. So, and extra benefit if you have metabolic issues. If you're doing intense training or you're looking for an anabolic response to strength training, probably more advantages to fed. Mm-hmm. And also, if you feel like garbage, don't do it.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like I'd pass out. I don't know.
Yeah. So then it doesn't work for you, right?
Yeah, totally. Okay. I have so many other questions for you guys. So we're just going to end it here. But I want to bring you back in because I'm sure we're going to have more questions once people hear this. But yeah, stick around for the next episode. We're going to talk about juicing, alcohol. We talked about fasting, which is great. We're going to talk about supplements, vitamins, personalization, underrated tips too, which I'm really excited about. Thank you guys so much for coming. Any final notes? One last thing you would want to tell somebody that is just beginning their journey and trying to make a change?
I think if you're not exercising, I hope we've convinced you that you need to start moving. I think and start lifting. I think that's one of the things that, I mean, we didn't get into it that much
Not
today,
even,
of this
yeah.
whole idea of, cardio versus, weightlifting. I think if you're going to do one form of exercise, it should be strength training. That most people don't really think about. Even you see this kind of really high level active people who are just kind of like running and cycling. Not that it's bad and that's really benefiting them, but they're also really asymmetrically training, which is going to, at some point down the road, going to get them into trouble. So I would say, start lifting. I mean, that's kind of the first thing I would say to everyone if they want to make a change in their lifestyle as it is, and they're not doing that.
Thanks, Dr. Ben.
I have more to say on that, obviously.
Yeah,
But
I know. I feel like we didn't even get, and this has been an hour and we got through so much, but like the heart is one of the most important organs in, the body. So I feel like there's so much I want to talk about, but we'll save that for episode number 2. Anything you want to say, Cam?
I think when it comes to strength training, because that's what we deal with mainly, is not to get hung up on the timing of it. If you can fit it in the middle of your day for 10 minutes, do 2 sets of squats, do some push-ups, because that's a lot better than doing nothing. So it's not always all or nothing when it comes to strength training. Same thing with nutrition. Doing a little bit is a lot better than doing nothing. And I find a lot of people get blocked by that timing of working out. Like, I don't have time. I don't have an hour to dedicate myself to working out. You're going to find a lot of benefits from just doing a little bit every day. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll be back.